Today we are looking at the Italian Four Knights, but with one very important condition. We are going to play it through the correct move order. Because a lot of players try to reach this setup with 1e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, knight c3, knight f6, bishop c4. And at first glance, that looks completely normal. You develop two knights, you put the bishop on c4, very civilized chess. But there is one little problem. Black can just take on e4, and this is the famous center fork trick. Black plays knight takes e4, and if white takes the knight, then d5 comes, forking our two pieces, black wins the piece back, gets a big center, and suddenly white is the one trying to prove equality. Is this the end of the world? No. Below 2000 Lichess Blitz, most people probably are not punishing this consistently. But the point is not just surviving one game. The point is building good habits now so you do not have to unlearn your opening later. So the right move order is e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, knight f6, and now d3, no matter if black plays bishop c5 first and then knight f6 or the other way around. Only after d3 do we play knight c3. The pawn on e4 is defended, the center fork trick is gone, and now we actually get the Italian four knights the way we wanted. Black usually develops normally with bishop c5 because it's the most active square for the bishop available, and now we play knight c3. And I know some people look at this move and think, isn't this the beginner Italian? Didn't we all play this when we were 12 and then decide it was too plain and tasteless? But I actually think that is unfair. Knight c3 develops a piece, supports the center, and very importantly, it makes black's d5 break much harder. Compared to the usual Italian, where white puts a pawn on c3 instead of the knight, this is a more compact setup. You are not immediately building some giant pawn center, but you are also not giving black quite as much counterplay. Now, the most common move on Lichess is d6, and this is completely understandable. Black develops the bishop to c5, then closes the gate with d6. It looks natural, it feels safe, but it also means the bishop on c5 is now boxed in. And when the bishop gets boxed in, we go knight a4. This is one of the main ideas of the whole setup. We are not playing some mysterious high-level maneuver. We are simply saying, your bishop came to c5, your pawn went to d6, and now that bishop has fewer squares, so we attack it. After knight a4, black usually goes bishop b6, and now we play a3. This is important because if black ever tries knight a5 to trade off our bishop on c4, we want bishop a2 available. We do not want our nice Italian bishop getting trapped because we forgot to give it a square. Very basic, very useful. Black castles, and now after bishop e6, we can simply take. Bishop takes e6, f takes e6. Black gets doubled e-pawns, and then we expand with b4. White has more queenside space, black has a slightly damaged structure, and the bishop on b6 can be taken whenever we want. Nothing dramatic, but very pleasant. And in Blitz, pleasant positions where your moves are easier than your opponent's moves are basically free rating with a small amount of paperwork. Now let's rewind, because black has other common moves. One move that looks extremely natural is castles right away. But this is actually a little bit careless, because now we get bishop g5. This is the one version where bishop g5 is really annoying. The point is that black ideally wants two things. They want d6 to defend e5, and they want a6 so the bishop can retreat to a7 when white plays d4. But unfortunately for black, chess still has that annoying rule where you only get one move at a time. So after bishop g5, h6, bishop takes f6, queen takes f6, knight d5, queen d8, c3, white is preparing d4. If black plays a6, then d4 hits immediately and black has to surrender the center. If black plays d6, then white can start chasing the bishop with b4 and a4, and suddenly that bishop on c5 is in real danger. So the lesson is, if black castles too early, bishop g5 becomes much more attractive, because black is not quite in time to get the ideal setup. Another very common move is a6. This move has a clear point. Black controls b5 and prepares to meet ideas like knight a4 with bishop a7, or later knight a5 to trade off our bishop. But now we change plans. Against a6, I really like bishop e3. At first, this looks slightly strange, because if black takes, we accept doubled pawns with f takes e3. But these doubled pawns are not really a weakness. The pawn on e3 controls central squares, and more importantly, the f-file opens. And in these Italian structures, an open f-file can become extremely annoying, especially when the bishop on c4 is already staring at f7. So after bishop e3, bishop takes e3, f takes e3, d6, a4, castles, castles, bishop e6, we should play the slightly unconventional b3. When black offers a light-squared bishop trade, we usually do not want to take immediately and fix everything for them. We play b3, and if black takes on c4, we recapture with the b-pawn. And suddenly, our pawn structure has improved. The b-pawn moves closer to the center, we get a grip on d5, and white can start thinking about queen e1 to g3 or h4, maybe knight d5, maybe rook b1. It is not a forced attack, but the play is very natural. And now let's look at a real blitz game, because this is where the whole thing becomes much more convincing. This was a Lichess 3-minute game between two players around 1700. The move order was a little different from our main line, but we reached the exact position we just talked about. Black takes on e3, white recaptures with f takes e3, and now the f-file is open. Black plays a6, white plays a4, black plays d6, and white develops with knight f3. So far, very normal. But now black plays knight e7, and I think this is already a little suspicious. Black probably wants knight g6, which looks like a reasonable maneuver, but they have not castled yet. And this matters, because the bishop on c4 is already hitting f7, and black's king is still sitting in the center. White castles. Black continues knight g6, and now white finds the moment, knight g5. This is exactly the kind of practical attacking chance the Italian four knights can create. White has the bishop on c4, the knight on g5, the open f-file, and black has not castled. Everything is suddenly pointing at f7. Black plays h6, which is basically asking white to prove it, and white proves it immediately. Knight takes f7. Now white wins a pawn, forks the queen and rook, and black is already in serious trouble. Black tries queen e7, white takes on h8, and at this point black could at least take the knight with the knight on g6. But in the game, black plays bishop e6 instead, and now it all collapses. White simply takes on g6 with the knight, and after bishop takes c4, white takes the queen on e7. Black recaptures with the king, white takes back on c4, and black resigns on move 15, as white is unironically up 15 points of material, which is just outrageous. And the funny thing is, white did not have to do anything insane. They just understood the basic ingredients: open f-file, bishop on c4, pressure on f7, and black's king not castled. That is why I like this opening as a practical weapon. It is not some cheap trap where you either win in 12 moves or get a bad position. It is more like a sensible Italian setup with a few very clear rules. First, do not play knight c3 too early if your plan is bishop c4. Play bishop c4 and d3 first, so the center fork trick is not available. Second, if black plays d6 and boxes in the bishop on c5, knight a4 is often the move. Third, if black plays a6 early, bishop e3 is a very useful answer, because after bishop takes e3, f takes e3 opens the f-file and makes black's a6 move look a little bit silly. Fourth, if black castles too early, bishop g5 can become annoying, because black often cannot get both d6 and a6 in time before white hits the center with d4. And fifth, do not obsess over memorizing 20-move engine lines. This opening is mostly about understanding which piece black is trying to trade when their bishop is boxed in, when your bishop needs a retreat square, and when the f-file becomes dangerous. Compared to something like the Vienna, this is not as explosive. You are probably not going to win every second game because your opponent's knight goes on a little holiday and never comes back. But that is also the point. The Vienna is fun, but once people know the right central reaction, the party becomes much more serious. The Italian four knights is calmer. It is more positional. It gives you positions where your plans make sense, where the same ideas keep repeating, and where your opponent often has to understand more than just one defensive move. And honestly, for blitz improvement, that is a really nice place to be. You are not gambling everything on one trap. You are building pressure, asking small questions, improving your pieces, and waiting for black to make one of those very human moves that looks normal but slightly misses the point. Sometimes that mistake is d6, boxing in the bishop. Sometimes it is castles, allowing bishop g5. Sometimes it is a6, allowing bishop e3 and an open f-file. And sometimes, as we saw in the game, black just leaves their king in the middle, moves the knight around, and gets absolutely flattened on f7. So if you are looking for a good weapon against 1e5, I think the Italian four knights is a very good candidate. Just please, for the love of all things pickled and bishop-shaped, play it through the right move order.